Hey everyone, welcome back to another video on my channel. In this video, I'll talk about sensitivity labels and sensitivity label policies. I will also demonstrate how to create and manage sensitivity labels and how an end user can apply them on their Microsoft Office apps like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Outlook, etc. First, let's understand what is sensitivity label. So sensitivity labels is an information protection feature on the Microsoft Purview portal, which provides protection settings that include encryption and content marking features. These labels can also protect content in the third-party apps by using the Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps, which is yet another SaaS solution by Microsoft to protect cloud apps by bringing deep visibility and strong data controls. Labels are supported by most of the MS Office desktop apps and mobile apps. As we can see here in the list, I'm just marking it for you. Alright, moving on. You can also see a sample of sensitivity labels. So when a user opens any of the apps like Excel, PowerPoint, or Outlook, etc., they can click on the sensitivity under the home ribbon and they can see the complete list of sensitivity labels that an organization has published for their users. Alright, moving on. While creating a label, we can decide whether it should be applied to all the users in an organization or to selective users and groups. Another important thing to note here is a user must be signed in with their Microsoft 365 work or school account to be able to view and apply labels. Moving on. Sensitivity labels can also be used to define privacy settings in Teams, Microsoft 365 groups, and SharePoint sites. We can also create labels without any protection settings so that users can apply them just to classify the data, and administrators can view the label activity on the Microsoft Purview portal, which I'll demonstrate later in the video. Another important thing to note here is a document or an email can have only one sensitivity label applied, and there is no way to apply more than one label. Additionally, if you delete a sensitivity label from the Purview portal, then the label is not removed from the content automatically, which is already applied, and protection settings configured on the label will remain applied to the content. Right? So once a label is applied, the action which is defined on the label will take place even if you delete the label. Alright, moving on. Let me now discuss about licensing and permissions you need to manage sensitivity labels. You can see the complete list of licenses here. Let me mark it. So a user must have any of these licenses assigned to be able to view and apply sensitivity label. Now let me talk about permissions. You can add a user to the existing role groups like Compliance Data Administrator or Compliance Administrator or Security Administrator role group. However, these role groups provide additional permissions than just managing sensitivity labels. If you wish to restrict a user's ability to just manage sensitivity labels, then you need to create a custom role group and add the role called Sensitivity Label Administrator as, let me just mark it. And if you just want someone to have read-only permissions to the sensitivity label, then you will need to add the user to the Sensitivity Label Reader role. By default, this role is not added to any role group. Therefore, you should create a new role group and add this role, followed by adding the required users as members. Let me now start the demo for this sensitivity label. I am now logged in to the Microsoft Purview Compliance portal, and in the left navigation bar, I have to click Information Protection. Then in order to create a new label, I have to click Labels and then click on Create a Label. I will now have to put a name for the label. So let's just call it Marketing. Please keep in mind though that this name will not be published to end users. Instead, whatever name you put in the display name is something that will be seen by users. So let me just call it internal. And in the description, you can put any meaningful name. I'll just click next. Now here we have to define the scope for labels. So basically, scope lets us decide whether labels should be used for office files like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc., or whether it should be used to define privacy and access control settings in Teams, Microsoft 365 groups, and SharePoint sites. Once I click Next, I can then define the protection settings for labeled items. At this stage, we can define whether we want to encrypt content once label is applied, or we want to add watermarks to content, or do we want to apply both actions. So I'll just put a check mark on both of them and then I'll click Next. So now here we have to define encryption settings for the labeled content. If I leave the first option selected, which is remove encryption if the file or email is encrypted, this simply means that encryption will get removed after a user receives the labeled content. It can be document or an email. So being an admin, we would obviously do not want encryption to be removed. Hence, I'll select the second option, which is configure encryption settings. So by clicking on this option, I can decide whether end users should apply permissions to the documents after a label is applied, or we, being an admin, can also choose what permissions should users have after they apply a label. So as you can see, these are the two options. So if I go with the first one, then being an admin, I can decide what permissions should user have after they apply a label. Or if I select the second one, I can then enforce end users to define the permission. Okay, so just for the purpose of this demo, I'll just leave this as let users assign permissions. And now I can click next. So here we can define if documents should have some sort of watermark. If so, what exactly watermark should say. Let's say I want this to say marketing. Font size I can define. I can also decide the color of watermark, let's say red, and then horizontal. Save. Now I'll just hit next. So here we have to define auto labeling settings for files and emails. Auto labeling simply means if certain keywords are found in a document or in an email, then label will get applied automatically. So as you can see, this feature is turned off by default, but we can turn it on. Now here we have to define a condition, and once that condition is met, label will get applied automatically. So I'll now click on add condition, content contains, click on the drop down, sensitive information types. So as you can see, majority of the information types are already listed here. As you can see, it has got a complete list of sensitive information types. So for example, I would like to go with credit card number. I'll put a check mark, click add. Okay. Now this simply means if a document or an email has credit card number in it, then this label will get applied automatically. Okay. Further, you can also create custom sensitive information types depending upon your need. And in order to create a new custom sensitive information type, you will have to again log into Microsoft Purview portal. From the left navigation panel, you have to click data classification, and under sensitive information types, you can create a new one depending upon your requirement. Alright, now let me go back. So here in the next step, you can decide whether labels should get applied automatically or whether users should get a prompt that they have to apply a label. So I'll go with recommend the users apply the label. Now I'll hit next. Here we have to define protection settings for group and sites. If I put a first check mark where it says privacy and external user settings, this simply means once a label is applied to a team or a Microsoft 365 group, then we can configure privacy settings. I'll show you that on the next page. If I put a check mark on second option that says external sharing and conditional access setting. So when this option is checked, we can define the external sharing settings on SharePoint as well as conditional access settings. I'll now click next. Now as you can see, it's now giving us an option to decide the privacy settings of Microsoft 365 groups and teams if they have label applied. Okay, so let's say if I go with private and I'll click on next and save it. Now the next time a new team or Microsoft 365 group is created, their privacy settings will have private option as default, and users will not be able to change privacy settings. Okay, so I'll just leave it on private. And then the next option is external user access. If I put a checkmark on this, then group owners will be able to invite guest accounts. And if this is unchecked, group owners cannot invite guests. Okay, now I'll just put a check mark on it and I'll hit next. So here we have to define external sharing and conditional access settings for SharePoint sites. So if I put a check mark on the first option, then once a label is applied to a SharePoint site, these external sharing settings will get applied by default and no users would be able to change it. Okay, so let's say if I go with only people in your organization, this means once this label is applied to SharePoint site, this particular sharing will be enabled. So that means only internal users would be allowed to access data from that particular SharePoint site. I'll not be talking about the second option because this is still in preview and it may not work as desired. Alright, I'll now click on next. So here it wants me to make a decision on whether label should be applied or used for schematized data assets. As this is still in preview and I also don't have the option to enable it, I'll just leave this as it is and I'll hit next. Now all the configurations have been made and I'll simply click on create label to create this label, which is called marketing internal. Okay, so the label has been created. I'll just click on don't create a policy yet and click done. Okay, as you can see, the newly created label is now appearing. So the next step for us is to publish it. because if you do not publish, end users won't be able to see it. Okay. So we can simply click on publish label, click on choose sensitivity label. I'll go with the newly created, add, next. So here it wants us to choose the list of users or groups to whom we would like to publish. If in case you do not make a decision here by selecting users or groups, this label will get published to all the users in our organization. I'll hit next. So here it wants us to configure policy settings. So if I put a check mark on the first option that says user must provide a justification to remove a label or lower its classification. This means if in case, let's say, user is applying a label or label is getting applied automatically, in that case they have an option to either remove it or change the label to something else, given the fact they are providing a justification. Okay. If I put check mark on second option that says require users to apply a label to their emails and documents, this simply means they have to apply a label to emails and documents. They don't have any way to skip that part. Okay. The third option is to require users to apply label to Power BI content. This means if someone is using Power BI desktop or Power BI on the web, they have to apply labels before they can proceed any further. The last option is to define a URL from where user can get more information about labeling. Okay, so I'll just uncheck the last option and third last, and I'll leave the first two check marked, and I'll hit next. Here it wants you to select a default label for document. So let's say I go with the newly created one. So this means when a user opens a document, they will have to apply this label, sorry. And I hit next now. Now the next thing is, what should be the label for emails? So if you leave this first option as it is, which is same as document, that means the previously decided label will get applied to emails as well. However, if you do not wish to apply any label to emails, then you can select none here and uncheck this. Okay, I'll now click next. Here we have to define what label should get applied to groups and sites. So if in case you do not want the newly created label to be applied, then you can select none, else you can select the label name and click next. Same here for Power BI. We have to make a decision what label should be applied. I'll just leave it to none and I'll hit next. Now here you have to define the policy name for sensitive label that we have just created called marketing. So I'll just leave it as marketing label policy, and I'll then click on next, submit. So we have created the policy and we have also published it successfully, and as you can see, it states that it can take up to 24 hours to publish the labels. I'll just click done, and now if I click on label policies, so the one that we have just published is this one. It also shows us the order, so that means this policy will take precedence over the other policies. Now as you can see, I've already got a couple of policies created, so I'll open up one of them. Let's open the second one, which is confidential-encrypt. I'll click on edit label so I can show you what all things I have configured in here. I'll just click next. I'll hit next. So this policy is going to encrypt items as well as going to mark items, which is watermarks. So here, as you can see, I have defined end users to be able to choose on the permissions they want to use. I'll hit next. So this is the watermark which is going to be applied once label is detected or applied automatically. I'll hit next. And as you can see, this auto labeling policy is configured in a way if the credit card information is found, then label will get applied automatically. I'll hit next. So these are the same configurations that I showed you earlier. I'll hit next, next. All right, so I'll just click on cancel here. Okay, so I'm just going to create a new document as well as an email so you can see if the policy gets applied automatically or not if the credit card information is found. Alright, now for the demo perspective, I was just drafting an email to see if it detects the credit card number or not. And as you can see, I just entered this credit card number and it automatically detected the same, and now it wants me to apply a sensitive label. So as you can see, this is the label which is called confidential-encrypt. So if I click right now, okay, so first of all, as you can see, there is no sensitive label applied to this email as of yet. However, the moment I click on accept recommendation, now it has applied confidential-encrypt sensitive label. So this email is now encrypted. Alright, now I have got Microsoft Word file opened up and I'll draft something which would also contain the credit card information to see if the system then detects the credit card information or not. So let me write. Number to purchase office chairs, and here I'll put the credit card number. Further, let me just put another card information. Okay, so before I proceed any further, as you can see, it has detected the confidential information, which is credit card number, and based on the sensitivity information label that we created, you can see it is now giving us a policy tip that your organization wants to apply a label. So now I can manually apply a label by clicking on the sensitivity icon at the top right under the home banner, and then I can click on confidential encrypt. I can now decide what permissions should end users have on this document. I will now create a new Microsoft 365 group to see if I can then define the privacy settings manually, as the sensitivity label is configured to set the privacy as private. Therefore, I expect the same to happen while creating a group. Right, let me now click on add a group. I'll choose Microsoft 365. You can put any name here. Let me assign an owner. Now let me add one of the members just for the testing. Here you have to put an email address for this Microsoft 365 group, and as you can see, the sensitivity label got applied, which is confidential-encrypt, and since this label is configured in a way to set the privacy as private, it automatically changed the privacy to private. So private simply means that no user would be able to join the group automatically, and it's the owner who will need to add remove members. Okay, so now let me just manually try to change public. As you can see, the public is grayed out. So I do not have an option to select public. So I'll just keep it private. Next, and create group. So this confirms that sensitivity label is working perfectly fine. One last thing that I like to share now is how an administrator can view all the label activities. So I'm currently logged in to the Microsoft Purview compliance portal. In the left navigation bar, I have to click data classification, and now the extreme right option, which is activity explorer, I'll click on it, and here it will list down all the activities, whether a label was applied or label was changed, and so on. So if I click on any of these events, it will now give me more information about the label. So as you can see, this is the label name that was applied. This is the machine name from which label was applied. This is the IP address of machine, and the type of application to which label was applied is MS Word. Similarly, if I open any other label activity, it will show me similar sort of information, and this time, as you can see, the label was applied on an Exchange mailbox. Okay, right? So I hope this information is helpful for you. Alright, that's it for this video. I hope you will find this video helpful. In case you have any concerns or questions, feel free to ask in the comments box and I will reply ASAP. Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe, share and like.